What would you do if you flew across the world to evict a poor family only to find a dying boy who calls you dad? The hum of the printer was the only sound in the sleek, glass-walled office of Callahan Real Estate. Jack Callahan sat behind a mahogany desk, sleeves rolled up, his signature flowing across page after page without hesitation. To him, these weren't homes. They were numbers, units, properties, investments. Unit 4A, cleared. 5C, done. 7B. His pen paused for a brief second. Something about that unit tugged faintly at his memory. Not the name Ava Carter, but the handwriting. It had been scanned into the digital file from a physical note written years ago. Familiar, but too distant to place. He squinted at the screen, then shook his head. Probably someone who overstayed rent amnesty, he muttered. Jack stood and handed the documents to Richard Cole, his longtime legal partner. Get these processed, no exceptions. Richard glanced at the screen, then back at Jack. You sure you want to deliver this one personally? Jack shrugged. People need to see who they're dealing with. He tucked the folded eviction notice for Unit 7B into the pocket of his suit and headed out, completely unaware that this delivery would rewrite everything he thought he knew. It was a sweltering Saturday afternoon at the open-air market just blocks from one of Jack's oldest residential buildings on Yarba Street. While his high-rise condos glittered with glass and chrome, this part of town buzzed with noise, sweat, and stories. Vanessa Blake, Jack's girlfriend of 6 years, stood in a line she clearly believed she shouldn't have to stand in. Draped in silk pants and designer sunglasses, she tapped her heel impatiently. "Excuse me," she snapped to the woman in front of her. "Mary, something?" The woman turned. She wore a faded blouse and a plain skirt. Her expression was calm but unyielding. "Ava Carter," she said simply. "Please, we've all been waiting. Let's just respect the line." Vanessa blinked, taken aback. "Do you know who I am?" Ava turned forward again. "Ma'am, we're all here for the same thing." The murmurs from the others in line were soft, but clear agreement. Vanessa's cheeks burned with humiliation. It wasn't just the queue. It was being told no by someone who didn't wear perfume that cost $300 or heels handmade in Milan. That evening, Vanessa lounged on Jack's designer sofa, a glass of wine in hand, wrapped in silk. Her voice was casual, but the bitterness beneath was unmistakable. "There's this woman I ran into today." "Rude, unpleasant, lives near one of your older buildings, I think." "The kind of person who doesn't belong in places we've built." Jack barely looked up. "She embarrassed me, Jack," she continued, her tone dripping with faux concern. "She lives in that dump on Yarba Street." "Can you imagine?" Vanessa didn't know who Ava really was, but something about her unsettled her, irritated her soul. A few days later, during one of her evening runs, Vanessa passed by the aging building on Yarba. She slowed down, narrowing her eyes as a woman stepped out with a plastic bag in one hand and a young boy clinging to the other. It was her. That same woman, that same calm look. Vanessa's heart pounded harder, not from cardio, but from fury. The boy looked up at Ava. "Mommy, can we have bread tonight?" Vanessa froze. There was something about that boy's face. Familiar, unnervingly so. She ducked behind a parked car, watching them disappear into the building. Then, without thinking, she pulled out her phone and called Jack. He didn't answer. Her thoughts spiraled. That woman, that boy, living on Jack's property, far too close to his world. That night, Vanessa waited until Jack got home. The candles were lit, the whiskey poured, the silk robe just loose enough to draw his attention. "There's someone in one of your older flats, Unit 7B, she said softly. Jack blinked. "I saw her again, the woman from the market." "She's squatting there, Jack. No pride, no class. It reflects badly on you." He poured himself a drink and sat down. "We don't personally vet tenants, Vanessa. I know, But for your image, especially now with that big deal coming up, you can't afford mistakes like this." She didn't say it outright, but she didn't have to. Jack was being considered for a major development partnership. Any whiff of mismanagement could cost him. He sighed. "Fine, I'll look into it." Vanessa smiled to herself. A quiet, satisfied smile. The seed had been planted. The next morning, Jack sat in the back of his SUV, scrolling through property files on a tablet. His schedule was packed, but something about Unit 7B stuck with him. "I'll handle this one myself," he told his assistant. The driver wove through the narrow streets of Yaba. Jack hadn't visited this side of town in years. As they neared the building, the air changed. More humid. More alive. Children ran barefoot, chasing a tire down the street. An old woman swept her steps, humming softly. Jack adjusted his cufflinks, climbed the stairs, and stopped in front of a cracked wooden door. Unit 7B. He knocked. When the door creaked open, the woman standing there made his heart lurch in his chest. Her face stirred something deep, familiar. Painful. And then a boy peeked out from behind her. Jack froze. It was like looking into a mirror from another lifetime. Jack Callahan stood frozen in the doorway of Unit 7B, staring into eyes that refused to flinch. Ava Carter, the woman from the market, the woman who had embarrassed his girlfriend, wasn't just a tenant. She was the past he never expected to face. And the boy beside her? With that same arch of the brow, the same dimple when he blinked. Jack's throat tightened. "I'm here. About the eviction," he finally said, voice lower than he meant. Ava nodded slowly, unmoved. "I know. I saw the notice this morning. You always did like delivering bad news in a suit." Her voice wasn't angry. It was tired, measured, full of restraint that had been learned, not chosen. The boy clutched her hand. "Mommy, who's this man?" Ava crouched beside him. "Just someone from the building office," she said gently, brushing his hair back. Then she stood tall again, eyes steady on Jack. "If you want to talk, come in. If not, you can leave the paper under the door." Jack hesitated and stepped inside. The apartment was modest, small kitchen, faded curtains, a couch that had seen too many years, but it was clean, warm, alive in a way his penthouse never was. The smell of menthol balm and rice lingered in the air. Jack sat stiffly on a plastic chair, unsure of what to do with his hands. Ava walked to an old drawer, pulled out a thin, sealed envelope, and placed it in his palm. "I wrote this over a decade ago," she said quietly. "You disappeared before I could send it. I didn't have your new address, your number, nothing. I found it months later." Thought, "What's the point?" Jack stared at the envelope. His name was written in soft blue ink. Jack Callahan. The edges were worn, like it had been opened, closed, and finally sealed for good. He opened it slowly. The date inside read 11 years ago. She had written everything, how they met at a college party, how they talked in the stairwell about pressure, disappointment, and family, how he had been drunk and numb, how she had been lonely, reading a pamphlet alone in the corner, how the night just happened, and how the next morning he left before she woke up. No note. No name, nothing. "I went to your hostel," she murmured aloud now, arms folded. "They said you dropped out. I tried writing through a guy named Logan, but—" Jack's voice cracked as he interrupted. "Logan never told me." Ava gave a soft, bitter laugh. "Maybe he knew you didn't want to be found." Silence settled between them. "You didn't even know my last name, did you?" she asked. Jack lowered his head. "No, I didn't. It wasn't just awkward. It was the sound of 11 years crashing down between them, all the things unsaid, all the questions he never asked, all the moments she had faced alone. He remembered the night, flashes of it. The rain outside, her quiet laughter, the way she hadn't tried to impress anyone. She had been real, present, and then she was gone. Or rather, he was gone. Ava sat across from him now, older, her eyes tired but still sharp. "It didn't have to mean more to you," she said. "But it changed my life." She glanced toward the curtain, where the boy Eli was resting. "You had the luxury to forget. I didn't." Jack swallowed hard. "I never even considered that I could have had your child," Ava finished for him, voice calm but cutting. "Of course you didn't." He leaned forward. "What's wrong with him?" Ava paused, then spoke slowly. "Congenital heart defect. We found out when he was 2. He's had 2 surgeries. He'll need another soon. The cold makes it worse." Jack's jaw clenched. The weight in his chest grew heavier. "I work online when I can," Ava continued. "Take freelance gigs, but medical bills don't care how hard you try." She wiped her hands on a napkin. "Alone is what I had left." Her eyes welled, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I didn't ask you for anything back then, not because I didn't need you, but because I couldn't afford to hope anymore." Jack sat there, stunned. The eviction letter burned in his pocket. This wasn't just some defaulting tenant. This was the mother of his child. A child who was fighting to breathe, while Jack had been signing away their home. He didn't say goodbye. He just stood, nodded stiffly, and walked out like a man fleeing a room full of fire. Outside, Lagos was loud again. Taxi drivers shouted, kids laughed, radios blared, but Jack didn't hear any of it. He walked straight to his car. "Where to, sir?" his driver asked. Jack didn't look up. "Just drive." An hour later, he sat alone in the back corner of a bar he hadn't visited in years. The same envelope lay on the table. He stared at it like it might burst into flames. Mary's words echoed in his head. "You didn't even know my last name." She had tried. He hadn't. He was too busy becoming Jack Callahan, property mogul, Forbes' darling, to think about what he left behind. "How did I miss this?" he whispered. The bartender glanced his way, but said nothing. Jack ran a hand over his face. This wasn't just guilt, it was grief. And it had been waiting over a decade to find him. Vanessa Blake had a gift, not for kindness, not for humility, but for control. For 6 years, she had curated the perfect image as the girlfriend of Jack Callahan, the real estate mogul with a jawline made for magazine covers and a bank account to match. She'd been at his side at every gala, whispered in his ear before every press interview, and hosted every investor dinner with charm so smooth it felt rehearsed. Because it was, and now it was unraveling. She had known something was off the moment he walked in that night. Jack didn't kiss her cheek, didn't ask about her day. Just dropped his keys in the bowl by the door and disappeared into the bedroom like a ghost. It was happening more often lately, late nights. Distant stares, a softness she didn't recognize and didn't welcome. At first, she thought it was stress. Then she remembered the market, the line. That woman, Ava Carter. Vanessa's lips curled as she poured herself a glass of wine and wandered into Jack's closet. His blazer hung where he left it, slightly wrinkled, unbuttoned, careless. But the envelope in the pocket, that was intentional. She pulled it out slowly. It was old, creased at the corners, yellowed by time. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the flap. It was a letter. Handwritten. She scanned the first few lines. A woman. A child. 11 years ago. Her breath caught. A one-night stand, a secret child, and the woman. It was her. The same woman who'd spoken to her like an equal in the market line. The same one who dared to dismiss her with grace and walk away without fear. Vanessa gritted her teeth. It wasn't just betrayal, It was humiliation. And Vanessa Blake didn't get humiliated. She returned the favor. Later that night, she curled into Jack's side like she always did, silk against skin, lips at his shoulder, voice soft and laced with sweetness. "You've been distant," she whispered. "Is everything all right?" Jack didn't respond. That silence was confirmation enough. She didn't confront him. Not yet. She wasn't stupid. Information was power, and she needed more of it. The next morning she made a call, not to a friend, to a journalist. Someone who owed her a favor. "I have a story," she said, swirling her coffee with perfect calm. "But I want it handled. Delicately. Quietly." "What kind of story?" "Personal," she said, "involving a very public figure and a very sick child." Meanwhile, Ava Carter stood outside a worn school building, her hands gently resting on her son's shoulders. "I want to try," Eli said, holding his backpack tight. He was pale, but determined. Ava hesitated. His last fever had only broken 2 days ago. But the light in his eyes, the hunger to feel normal, melted her hesitation. "Okay," she said softly, "but you take your medicine with you." "And no running, you hear me?" Eli nodded and kissed her hand before walking through the school gates. Ava exhaled and whispered a silent prayer. Back across town, Jack Callahan stared at the screen in his office. The DNA results were clear, undeniable, 99.9% match. Eli was his son. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. He hadn't told Ava. Not yet. He didn't want to come in like some hero, waving paperwork. He wanted to earn his place, not demand it. But time was something he might not have much of. The boy was sick, and Vanessa. She was too quiet, too calculating. Jack knew her rhythms, and this wasn't withdrawal. It was strategy. That night, Vanessa posted a photo, an old one. Her and Jack at a black tie event, both laughing, champagne in hand. A picture that screamed, "Power couple." The caption, "Moving on doesn't mean looking back." It was subtle, poised. Perfect, and strategic poison. The post went viral within their social circles. Board members forwarded it to Jack with "just checking in" messages. Investors sent vague texts asking if everything was okay. Jack didn't reply to any of them. He didn't call Vanessa either. He met Logan Pierce, his cousin and closest confidant, at a quiet rooftop bar that night. "She's spiraling," Jack said, staring at his untouched drink. "She thinks I owe her a future I never promised." Logan leaned back. "You did build a life with her, man. Visibility. Power. You gave her a seat at the table." Jack's voice dropped. "Then she never really knew me." Logan nodded slowly. "Then rewrite your legacy." But across the city, Vanessa was already planning her next move. She scrolled through the comments on her post. Most were supportive, some speculative, but none gave her what she wanted. She wanted destruction. She wanted Ava Carter to disappear from Jack's life permanently, and if that meant burning down his carefully built empire, so be it. The following day, Ava got a call from the school. Panic in the secretary's voice. Eli had collapsed during class. Ava raced to the hospital, heart in her throat, eyes blurring as she ran through the emergency ward. "Where is he?" she gasped. A nurse led her to a small room. Monitors beeped steadily beside her son's bed. Oxygen hissed softly through the mask on his face. She sat beside him, trembling, holding his hand. "Mama's here, baby," she whispered. "Just hold on." Jack arrived 15 minutes later. He didn't call. He didn't knock. He just stood in the doorway, frozen. Eli lay so still, so fragile. Ava didn't look at him. "I was still trying to pay the last hospital bill," she said, her voice raw. Jack didn't speak. He just stepped forward and placed his hand on the foot of the bed. For the first time in his life, the man who built towers in the sky had never felt so small. 3 days. That's how long it took. 3 long, heavy days between the hospital and the lab. Jack Callahan hadn't slept much during those hours. He barely left his office, barely touched his phone. He carried one thing with him the whole time, the envelope. Inside it was the truth. Measured, scientific, final. He stared at it now, unopened on his desk, like it might burst into flames if he touched it too soon. But he already knew. The moment he looked into Eli's eyes, he knew. The DNA was just paperwork. Still, his fingers shook as he slid the envelope open. He scanned the bold black letters. 99.9% probability of biological relationship. He didn't move, didn't cry. He just leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in his chest for 11 years. Logan Pierce walked in a few moments later and froze when he saw him. "It's true, huh?" Logan asked gently. Jack didn't open his eyes. "Yeah, it's true." Logan sat beside him. "So, what now?" Jack finally looked up. "Now I stop acting like a ghost in my own life." Across the city, Ava Carter sat by her son's hospital bed. Eli had stabilized. His breathing was steadier, color slowly returning to his cheeks, but her thoughts were anything but calm. Jack hadn't called, hadn't texted. He had shown up, yes, but then disappeared again like smoke. She didn't know what that meant. She didn't expect miracles. She didn't even expect him to stay. But what she feared most was false hope, the kind that shows up with flowers and apologies and vanishes when things get hard again. That evening, Jack returned to the hospital. He didn't wear a suit this time, just jeans and a plain black shirt. He knocked once. Ava opened the door, eyes wary. "I cancelled the eviction," he said quietly. She nodded. "I know. The manager left a new notice this morning." The silence stretched. Jack looked down. "Ava, why didn't you try harder to find me?" Her eyes snapped up, sharp and disbelieving. "Excuse me?" "I mean," he fumbled, 11 years. She stepped back, folded her arms. Her voice was low but steady. "Oh. I did try. I went to your campus dorm. They said you left. I sent letters to the only address I had. No response. I asked Logan. Nothing." Jack blinked. "He never told me," Ava scoffed. "Maybe he knew you didn't want to be found." Then she stepped closer, her voice rising, not in volume but in weight. "And even if I had found you, what would I have said?" "Hi, remember me from that one night you don't recall? I'm pregnant." You would have thought I was desperate or trying to trap you. Jack looked pained. "That's not fair." Her voice cracked. "Neither was raising a child alone." Then it dropped again. Quiet, almost too soft to hear. "I stopped chasing shadows, Jack. I had a child to keep alive." Hope didn't pay the hospital bills. He didn't try to argue. Instead, he sat down at the small kitchen table like he had a right to be there and whispered, "I'm sorry." Ava turned away, because after all these years, an apology, no matter how sincere, couldn't patch over everything he'd missed. Meanwhile, in the penthouse apartment across town, Vanessa Blake was unraveling. She hadn't seen Jack in over a week. No texts. No calls. Not even a passive-aggressive "hope you're well" message. And worst of all, her post hadn't worked. Instead of drawing him back in, it had only widened the distance. So she changed tactics. That night, when Jack came home, she was waiting at the kitchen island. Glass of wine in one hand, phone in the other, smile brittle. "You've been avoiding me," she said. Jack set his keys down with a sigh. "I've had things on my mind." She took a breath. "I saw her. That woman with her son." Jack froze. She smiled bitterly. "You don't even deny it." He didn't. She stepped closer, voice dripping venom. "So what's the plan, Jack? You going to make some grand announcement? Real estate mogul has secret love child in the slums? That the headline you're going for? He clenched his jaw.
Don't push me, Vanessa, she laughed coldly. Push! I've stood beside you for 6 years.
I helped build your image, smiled at your fundraisers, and now I'm being replaced by a forgotten girl and a sick kid. Jack turned away. I don't care about the image right now. Her voice sharpened. Well, I do. That night, as Jack slept in the guest room, Vanessa made another call, this time to a junior staff member at a private clinic. Someone who had access, someone willing to bend rules for a price. These are the files you asked for, the man whispered the next day, handing over a flash drive in a dark parking lot. Medical records, insurance appeals, the kid's whole history. Vanessa didn't blink. You'll get double what I promised, if it's all real. He nodded. It's real. She waited until she was alone in her car, then plugged the drive into her laptop. She found what she needed quickly, photos of Eli, hooked up to machines, oxygen tubes taped to his cheeks. She picked up the phone. I want these leaked, quietly. Let the world draw its own conclusions. The voice on the other end hesitated. This could backfire on you. Vanessa stared at the screen, voice flat. I'm not in the picture anymore. I have nothing to lose. But what she didn't understand, what she'd never understand, is that this story wasn't hers to control anymore. Because Jack Callahan wasn't fighting for his reputation now, he was fighting for his son. And for the first time in years, he finally knew what mattered. It started with a whisper, a blurry screenshot, a forwarded email. Then it spread like wildfire. By midweek, half the city's real estate circle had seen the headline, Real Estate King Hiding Love Child in the Slums? Sources claim Jack Callahan has a sickly child from a past fling. Insider says medical bills are being paid with company funds. The article included a photo of Eli Callahan in a hospital bed, oxygen mask over his face, pale, fragile. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew. Everyone always knew. At 9:12 a.m., Jack Callahan walked into the boardroom on the 18th floor of his corporate tower. His face was unreadable, jaw tight, shoulders squared. He wore no tie. Just a black suit and a storm in his chest. The room was quiet, too quiet. Executives sat stiffly. Legal counsel scribbled something into a notebook. One of the younger board members looked down at his phone like it might save him. Jack took his seat at the head of the table. Richard Cole, his longtime legal partner, broke the silence. Jack, we've supported you through many things. But these new revelations, this is different. He slid a printed article across the table. Jack didn't need to read it. He already had. Another member, a woman from investor relations, folded her hands tightly. Some of our largest partners are nervous. They're asking questions. They feel blindsided. Jack exhaled slowly. I understand their concern. But the child, someone interjected. The location, the optics, the timing. Right before the East River Project vote, you have to see how this affects the brand. Across the table, Logan Pierce, silent until now, leaned forward. If we're stripping a child's humanity to protect our stock price, what kind of legacy are we really preserving? That shut the room down for a moment. Then the chairman cleared his throat. Jack, we're not accusing you of wrongdoing. We're asking you to clarify your position. What matters more right now, your image or the impact of your choices? Jack's voice didn't tremble when he spoke. I've already decided. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked each person in the eye. I've built this company from nothing. And I won't let a child's illness become a PR scapegoat. I'm a father, and I won't apologize for that. The room stayed silent. Not because they agreed, but because for the first time, Jack wasn't talking like a CEO. He was talking like a man who had nothing left to hide. That night, Jack drove straight to Ava's apartment in Yaba. Not with security, not with lawyers, just a grocery bag in one hand and guilt in the other. She opened the door cautiously. He stepped inside quietly, nodding at Eli, who was curled up on the couch watching cartoons. "I brought some food," Jack said, setting the bag down. "Vegetables, a whole chicken, and strawberry ice cream." Ava raised an eyebrow, arms crossed. "You cooking?" Jack grinned. "With your help?" "I'm just the assistant." Eli laughed from the couch. It was the first real laugh Jack had heard from him. It hit deeper than any applause from a boardroom ever had. That night, they made dinner together. Jack chopped onions too thick. Ava scolded him for bruising the tomatoes. Eli danced around with a wooden spoon. For a moment, the kitchen felt like something close to normal. After dinner, they played a board game with missing pieces and house rules. Ava watched Jack closely. There was still a wall between them, but it was thinner now, no longer made of concrete, more like cracked wood. It could be mended or broken down. When she walked him to the door later, her voice was steady. "Don't think a few dinners and laughs change everything." Jack nodded. "I don't." She paused. "He's starting to depend on you now. If you disappear again, it'll break him." Jack swallowed. "I won't." Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa Blake watched her plan unfold with practiced calm. The article had done what she intended, created chaos. But not the kind she expected. Instead of running, Jack had doubled down. He had stepped into the fire and somehow walked through it. Vanessa wasn't impressed. She was enraged. And when rage took over, logic left the room. That weekend, she posted another image, this time from a gala event 6 months earlier. Her hand rested on Jack's back, both of them laughing. Perfect. The caption was simple. "Moving on doesn't mean looking back." The post exploded in their social circles. Old college friends, investors, charity patrons, everyone saw it. But Jack didn't respond. He didn't text her. He didn't even call. Instead, he met Logan for drinks again. "She's spiraling," Jack said, sipping a glass of water instead of whiskey, "trying to hold on to something I let go of months ago." Logan shook his head. "You didn't just let go. You outgrew it." Jack looked out over the city skyline. "I'm not the man she wants anymore." "Then who are you now?" Logan asked. Jack's voice was quiet. "Someone who's learning how to be a father." The next morning, Jack dropped by Ava's apartment again. No big gestures. Just presence, consistency. He brought a comic book for Eli, some fresh fruit, and a box of tea for Ava. "I don't want to just show up for the crises," he said. "I want to be there for the boring days too." Ava didn't say much, but when she closed the door behind him, she smiled. Just a little. Because sometimes healing doesn't start with forgiveness. Sometimes it starts with showing up. Again and again. Monday came with grey skies and a chill in the air. At a small school just off Yaba Street, Eli Callahan clutched his backpack with quiet determination. His body was still healing, but his spirit, fierce. "I want to go, Mom," he had told Ava that morning. "I need to catch up. I'm tired of being the sick kid." Ava hesitated, holding his cheeks in her hands. "No running, no stress, and you call me if you feel even a little strange." Eli nodded. "Promise." She kissed his forehead and watched as he stepped onto the school grounds like a warrior entering battle with books instead of a sword. For a few hours, things felt normal. Math. Reading, lunch. But kids notice everything. They whisper, they point, they question. And today, they whispered about him. It started with a group of boys huddled near the fence during recess. One of them, a tall, smirking kid named Dapo, nudged another and motioned toward Eli. "Hey, precious boy," he said with a grin. "Is it true your dad didn't want you?"
Eli froze, a half-eaten sandwich in his hand. What? Darpo laughed. We saw it online. My brother showed me. Your mom lives in some dirty building. And your dad's like, rich. Another kid chimed in. So why didn't he ever come for you? The laughter wasn't loud, but it cut like glass. Eli dropped his sandwich and turned away. His chest tightened. Not from his condition, but from something worse. Shame. He ran to the nearest restroom and locked himself inside, heart pounding.
Ava got the call from the school counselor an hour later. She raced through the hallway, her breath sharp with panic. Eli was lying on a cot in the nurse's office, staring blankly at the ceiling.
When he saw her, his lip quivered. I'm okay, he whispered. But he wasn't. 10 minutes later, Jack Callahan arrived. He pushed the door open slowly, his face pale, eyes tight. Ava stepped aside without a word. Jack knelt beside the cot. Talk to me, champ, he said softly. What happened? Eli turned his face away. They said, you didn't want me. Jack's throat closed, that you were ashamed of me. Silence. Then Jack reached out and held his son's hand. Listen to me, he said, voice thick with emotion. None of that is true. I didn't know about you. That's the only reason I wasn't there. He paused, fighting tears. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Eli blinked, then whispered, Promise? Jack nodded. I promise. Later that evening, after Eli was asleep, Ava sat at the kitchen table, arms folded. Jack sat across from her. He shouldn't have to deal with this, she said quietly. He's just a child. I know. Kids are cruel. But the world, her voice broke, the world will be worse, especially if they think his own father doesn't claim him. Jack looked down, ashamed. I'm trying, Ava, she sighed. I know you are, but trying isn't enough anymore. It's time you make this public. Jack looked up. You want me to announce him like a press release? No, she said, her voice sharp. I want you to protect him. Not in private, in the same spotlight you've lived in for the last decade. 2 days later, Jack did just that. He showed up to a public fundraiser for youth health initiatives, a cause he'd supported for years. But this time, he didn't come alone. As he stepped onto the stage to deliver his usual remarks, the cameras flashed, and gasps filled the room. Standing beside him was a young boy in a navy blazer, small hand tucked into Jack's. My name is Jack Callahan, he began. Most of you know me as a developer, an investor, a CEO. He paused. But tonight, I want to speak not just as a businessman. I want to speak as a father. You could hear a pin drop. This is Eli, he continued, glancing at his son. He is my son. He's brave, brilliant, and stronger than anyone I know. Whispers swept through the crowd, but Jack stood tall. I didn't know about him for a long time. That's on me, but I won't let my silence be his shame. He's not a secret. He's a gift. The applause started slowly, then it grew. Eli looked up at his dad and smiled. Backstage, Ava watched from behind a curtain. She didn't expect to cry. But she did, not because of the cameras, not because of the crowd, but because for the first time since Eli was born, he wasn't alone in the light. Across town, Vanessa Blake saw the footage from her phone. She was sitting alone in her apartment, the curtains drawn. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just watched and seethed. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next day, Jack dropped by Ava's apartment with 2 bags of groceries and a small envelope. Inside the envelope was a trust document. Eli's name was at the top. Whatever happens to me, Jack said, his care, his future, it's secure. Ava read the document carefully, then looked up. This doesn't fix everything, Jack nodded. I know. She set the paper down. I don't want your guilt, or your charity. I want your presence.
Daily, not just when things are bad, not just when the cameras are on, Jack exhaled.
I'm not perfect. I don't know how to do this. Then learn, she said. He deserves that much. And so, he did.
He came over on Tuesdays with fruit and new books. He learned how to help with Eli's medication. He even learned how to make rice without burning the pot. He didn't just visit, he stayed. And slowly, Eli started believing that his father wasn't just a name. He was real. The night of the Business Impact Awards arrived with flashing cameras and polished perfection. The kind of night Jack Callahan once thrived in, suited in tailored Armani, smiling for reporters, exchanging firm handshakes with men who measured worth by headlines and handshakes. But tonight felt different, because this time he didn't come alone. Standing beside him on the red carpet was Eli, dressed in a miniature navy suit, his chest rising steadily, no oxygen tubes, no shadows under his eyes, just quiet pride. And on Jack's other side, in a modest but elegant navy gown, was Ava Carter. She had hesitated. "This is your world, Jack." "Not mine." But Eli had begged. "Just this once, Mommy. I want to see Dad win." So she came, for her son, not the cameras. Inside the grand ballroom, murmurs floated like perfume. "Is that the boy? Is that her?" Jack didn't flinch. He nodded at every table, shook hands when necessary, but never once let go of Eli's hand. At their assigned table, a server poured water into crystal glasses. Eli reached for the breadbasket and whispered, "Can I eat the one with all the seeds?" Ava chuckled softly. "You can have both," Jack smiled. Just that, an ordinary family moment in an extraordinary place. When the awards ceremony began, Jack listened half-heartedly until the final category, Humanitarian Innovator of the Year. The MC cleared his throat dramatically. "And the winner is Jack Callahan!" Applause thundered across the room. Flashbulbs popped. Jack stood. But instead of heading straight to the stage, he turned to Eli and knelt beside his chair. "You want to walk with me?" he asked. Eli's eyes lit up. He nodded. Hand in hand, they crossed the ballroom together. The crowd fell quieter. It wasn't the image anyone expected, but it was the image they wouldn't forget. At the podium, Jack adjusted the microphone. He looked at the audience, not just the ones in front of him, but the ones watching online, reading lips, dissecting everything. He took a breath. "Success isn't about how far you rise," he began, "but about who you take with you." No dramatic pause. No rehearsed line, just truth. He glanced down at Eli, then found Ava's eyes across the room. "I almost lost sight of that. I almost missed the most important person in my life. But grace gives you a second chance." A beat of silence. Then the room erupted, but Jack only looked at one person, his son, who stood beaming beside him. "You were amazing, Daddy," Eli whispered. Jack didn't need the trophy in his hand. He'd already won. After the ceremony, in a quiet corridor near the valet stand, Ava stepped outside to breathe. The night air was cool, the buzz of laughter and perfume trailing behind her. She turned to head back in until a voice sliced through the quiet. "You think you've won, don't you?" Vanessa Blake emerged from the shadows in a crimson gown, eyes sharp, voice cold. Ava didn't flinch. "I didn't know this was a competition." Vanessa stepped closer, heels clicking with restrained fury. "You humiliated me." "You ruined my relationship." "No," Ava said calmly. "He chose to be present for his son. You're angry at that." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "He'll get bored. They always do. And when he does, I'll be there, reminding him what real power feels like." Ava tilted her head, almost smiling. "Power without peace is just noise." She turned to walk away. Vanessa hissed, "You don't belong in his world." Ava paused at the door, then replied, "Maybe not, but his world keeps showing up at my door." Then she walked back inside, not as a guest, not as an outsider, but as a mother who had already won something far more permanent than applause. Saturday morning rolled in with warm light spilling through the curtains of Ava's small apartment. In the kitchen, she stirred a pot of jollof rice, the scent filling the room like comfort. In the living room, Eli was spinning in slow circles, arms out like airplane wings, humming under his breath. His color had returned, his energy too. The boy who once fought to breathe now danced without hesitation. The doorbell rang. Ava wiped her hands, opened the door, and found Jack standing there, casually dressed, holding a bag of plantains and a DVD. "Movie night?" he asked. She arched a brow, arms crossed, but a smile tugged at her lips. She stepped aside. Dinner was simple, but warm. The three of them sat on the floor, bowls in hand, watching an old animated movie with fuzzy subtitles. Jack burned his tongue on a piece of hot rice. Eli laughed so hard he almost dropped his spoon. They played another round of Uno. Ava won twice. When the laughter faded and the movie's credits rolled, Jack helped clean up. As he dried dishes beside Ava, he cleared his throat. "I've been thinking a lot," he said. She didn't turn to face him. "About what?" "About what you said. About consistency." She set the plate down. "And?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. "I've set up a fund for Eli. Medications, procedures, therapy, whatever he needs. It's already active." No strings attached. She didn't take the envelope. Instead, she met his eyes. "Why now?" "Because I should have done it years ago. And because I'm not trying to fix things with money, I just want to help." She stared at him for a long moment, then took the envelope. "I'll use it," she said, tucking it into the drawer. "But don't confuse this with a second chance." "I won't. You don't get to buy your way back into our lives." "I'm not trying to," he said. "I just want to show up. Every day, even for the boring parts." Across town, Vanessa Blake sat at her vanity table, scrolling through her phone. Her polished nails tapped against the glass, stopping on a photo someone had snapped outside Ava's apartment. Jack. Carrying groceries, her jaw clenched. She had tried to embarrass him, expose him, ruin the image he spent years building. Instead, he owned the story, and people were cheering for him now. She was the one left behind, and she hated how that felt. Monday morning came with a soft drizzle. Ava stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her head wrap. She had a job interview, her first in almost 7 years. Jack had offered to drive her. She declined. "I need to do this on my own." He respected that. Still, he parked 2 streets over, just in case. The design firm's lobby was sleek and glassy. The receptionist barely looked up. "Have a seat." "Someone will be with you." Minutes stretched into nearly an hour. Then finally, "Miss Carter?" She stood quickly, clutching her worn portfolio. Inside the interview room, 3 people sat behind a long table. Their expressions were neutral, professional. One of them, a man with silver-rimmed glasses, flipped through her resume. "Your experience stops at 2016. "Yes," Ava said. "I took time off to raise my son." He was born with a heart condition, needed constant care. Another interviewer glanced at her designs. "We understand," she said. "But in our industry, continuity matters. Design evolves fast." Ava nodded. "So do people." She slid her sketches across the table. "These are from this year. I taught myself the latest software. Every line here, every layout, I built it on borrowed time during hospital nights and nap hours." The room grew quiet. Then one of them, silent until now, picked up the drawings. "You made these?" "Every detail." A shift happened in the room. Curiosity replaced skepticism. Respect replaced doubt. When Ava stepped back outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds had broken. She didn't know if she got the job, but she had done something more important. She showed up. For herself, not just as a mother, but as a woman who was still here, still fighting, still whole. That night, across the city, in the darkened parking lot behind a private hospital, Vanessa waited. A young man, nervous and jittery, slid into the passenger seat and handed her a second flash drive. "These are the expanded records," he muttered. "Everything on Ava Carter. Her son, appeals, case notes." She didn't blink. "You'll be paid by tomorrow." He got out, quickly. Vanessa plugged the drive into her laptop. She found the photos again. Eli, pale, unconscious, tubes in his nose. Ava, head down, holding his hand.
And in her twisted heart, Vanessa smiled. She picked up her phone. "I want these leaked."
Quietly. "No names. Let the world fill in the blanks." "Are you sure?" the voice on the other end asked. "If this leads back to you," she laughed, a sound as hollow as her intentions. "I'm not even in the picture anymore. I have nothing to lose." But the truth was, she'd already lost. She just didn't know it yet. The leak exploded across social media by sunrise. It started on a niche gossip blog, then jumped to private investor group chats. By mid-morning, every major business outlet in the city had caught wind of it. Powerful CEO Jack Callahan, linked to secret love child in Lagos slum, company funds used for private medical care. Attached was a grainy photo of Eli Callahan in a hospital bed, tubes in his nose, his mother Ava Carter by his side, her hand wrapped around his. The caption was cruel. The intent, even crueler. Jack Callahan read the headline in silence, seated at the edge of his bed. His phone buzzed non-stop, texts from PR, calls from board members, warnings from legal. He didn't answer any of them. Instead, he stood, buttoned his shirt, and reached for his car keys. Today was the board meeting, and this time he was walking in with nothing to hide. The conference room was quiet when he entered, tense, cold. No welcome, no smiles, just 10 sets of eyes that had once trusted him with everything and were now wondering if he'd dragged them into scandal. Jack took his seat at the head of the table. Richard Cole, the company's general counsel, slid a printed headline across the table. "We need a response, Jack." Another executive, arms folded tight, added, "This has gone beyond a personal matter. Shareholders are concerned. Your silence is becoming a liability." Jack looked at the paper, then back at them. "I wasn't silent out of shame," he said. "I was silent to protect a child who never asked for any of this." A woman from investor relations spoke next. Her tone was even, but clipped. "We have the East River project vote coming up. The exposure could jeopardize everything." "I understand," Jack said. But Logan Pierce, seated at the far end, finally raised his voice. "You all talk like Eli is a footnote, a complication. He's a little boy. He was sick. He almost died, and the only thing this company seems worried about is whether the stock dips by 2%. He stood. "What are we really building here?" Silence. Then the chairman looked at Jack directly. "You need to decide what matters most, your public image or your private impact." Jack didn't flinch. "I already have." He stood, hands steady, shoulders square. "I've given years to this company, built it from a borrowed desk and a leased office, and I'm proud of what we've done." He paused. "But if this board thinks I'm going to apologize for being a father, think again." He let the words sink in. "If you want me out, say it now. But I won't explain myself for loving my son." The room stayed silent. Not because they were all on his side, but because for the first time in years, they respected him not as a CEO, but as a man who finally stood for something real. That night, Jack didn't go home to his penthouse. He didn't scroll through damage control reports. He didn't call his PR team. Instead, he drove to Yaba Street with a simple brown bag in his hand.
Dinner. Ava opened the door, surprised to see him. You're supposed to be in hiding, she teased.
He shook his head. I've done enough hiding for one lifetime. Inside, Eli was building a Lego spaceship on the floor. Jack sat down beside him. They didn't talk about the headlines, they didn't have to. Presence speaks louder than press. Meanwhile, in her high-rise apartment across town, Vanessa Blake watched a different kind of fire unfold. Her leak had sparked attention, yes, but not the kind she'd hoped for. Instead of scandal, there was sympathy. Instead of shame, support. The world didn't turn on Jack. It rallied around the little boy with the tubes and the father who came back. She smashed her wine glass against the floor. You think you're safe, she muttered to the empty room. But her voice was hollow, because even she knew this wasn't her story anymore. 2 days later, Jack stood at Ava's door again. He looked tired, but calm, like a man who had made peace with whatever storm was still coming. Ava let him in. Eli's asleep, she said softly. They sat at the table. For once, there was no tension, just a quiet rhythm between two people who had learned how to speak in silence. She confronted me, Ava finally said. Vanessa, after the awards. Jack's head jerked up. What? She didn't touch me. Just words, poison, but I saw it in her eyes. She's not done. Jack clenched his jaw. She's trying to destroy what little we've rebuilt, Ava nodded slowly. But she's not the threat anymore, Jack. You are. His brow furrowed. Your silence is. He looked down, ashamed. You're right. He reached into his jacket and slid a document across the table. I've added your name to a trust for Eli. No matter what happens to me, his future is guaranteed. Ava stared at the paper, then looked at him. That's not what I want from you. Jack exhaled. Then what do you want? She didn't blink. I want consistency, not grand gestures, not rescue missions. Just you, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Jack leaned back. I don't know how to be what you need. Then learn. And in that moment, Jack realized. He'd faced down lawsuits, city officials and cutthroat developers. But this, showing up consistently for the people who matter, this was the real test. And this time, he didn't plan to fail. Saturday came quietly. Sunlight filtered through the old curtains in Ava Carter's kitchen as she stirred a pot of jollof rice. The apartment smelled of tomatoes, thyme, and something warm that had nothing to do with food. In the living room, Eli Callahan spun around with a plastic toy airplane, giggling to himself. No IVs. No beeping monitors. Just the sweet noise of a boy being a boy again. Then came the knock. Ava wiped her hands and opened the door. Jack Callahan stood there in jeans and a grey t-shirt, holding a small grocery bag and a DVD. Movie night? He asked. She gave him a look, half a challenge, half a smile, and stepped aside. He was learning, not to show up with grand speeches, but to simply show up. They ate together on the floor again, using mismatched bowls and an old blanket. Eli talked non-stop about a science project, about how the school nurse gave him 2 crackers instead of 1, and how he wanted to design sneakers one day that also lit up. Jack listened like it was a shareholders' meeting. No phone in hand, no distractions. Just him and his son. After dinner, the movie played. Something animated. Silly, loud. Ava leaned against the armrest, watching both of them. Jack sat with one arm around Eli, who had curled against his side, eyes fluttering with sleep. She hadn't said it out loud, but she had noticed. He hadn't missed a single visit in weeks. He brought groceries, helped with medicine, attended parent-teacher meetings, sat in waiting rooms during follow-ups. He didn't just arrive, he stayed. When the credits rolled and the lights came back on, Ava walked Jack to the door.
He turned to her, eyes softer now. Not the eyes of a CEO, not a man trying to fix something. Just a father, and a man who had learned to listen. "You're building something here," she said. He nodded, trying. She looked at him carefully. No promises. He nodded again. Just presence. Then she smiled. That small, reluctant smile that had once been a fortress. And now, maybe, an open door. The next morning, Jack showed up again. No reason, no crisis. Just a paper bag with warm pastries and fresh mango. Eli was already dressed and bouncing by the window. "Can we go to the park today?" Jack grinned. "You lead the way." They spent the afternoon under a tree, watching pigeons, counting clouds, and racing sticks down a rain gutter like boats. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, but it was real. A few weeks later, Ava stood outside the school gates, waiting for Eli to come out. Jack stood beside her, 2 coffees in hand. "He's thriving," she said, watching their son sprint across the playground, waving a drawing in the air. Jack glanced at her. "So are you." She laughed. "You're getting better at noticing." "I'm learning," he said. "Takes time." She looked at him. "You've stopped trying to be the hero." "Heroes disappear after the rescue," he said quietly. "I'd rather be the dad who's still here when the dishes need washing." And he meant it. That night, he didn't go back to his penthouse. He stayed. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. Eli fell asleep on his shoulder while reading. Jack carried him to bed and tucked him in. Ava watched from the hallway. No candles. No speeches. Just Jack placing a hand gently on his son's chest, watching it rise and fall, the way a father does when he's afraid to blink. When he's finally learned how fragile time can be. Back in the living room, Ava handed Jack a blanket. He didn't ask to stay. She didn't offer the couch. He knew his place. For now, it was here. Not permanently, not yet, but close enough to matter. Across town, in a high-rise full of windows and silence, Vanessa Blake sat alone at her dining table, scrolling through old photos on her phone. Jack and her at a gala. Jack and her laughing on a yacht. Jack, and no longer hers. She stared at a new headline on her screen. From mogul to father. Jack Callahan's quiet redemption. The article didn't mention her, didn't mention what she'd leaked, or what she tried to destroy. It just spoke of a man who had once lost everything important and decided to show up every day to rebuild it. She set the phone down and poured another glass of wine. Still alone, still waiting for a world that had long moved on. Back on Yuba Street, Ava turned off the lights and stood by the window. In the dark, she could hear Eli's soft breathing in the other room. Behind her, Jack had fallen asleep on the couch, one arm over his eyes, the other resting where Eli had left his drawing. She watched them both for a while. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was holding everything together on her own. There were no promises made, no forever declared. But there was presence. And for now, that was enough. Sometimes, the most important things in life don't come from success or wealth, but from the moments we choose to make things right. Jack Callahan's story reminds us that being a father isn't about titles or money. It's about showing up, taking responsibility, and loving without conditions, even when it's hard. No matter how far we've drifted, there's always a path back if we're willing to walk it. Ava didn't hold on to anger or demand retribution. She simply wanted her son to have the one thing he had missed, a father who stayed. Eli didn't need a millionaire. He needed a man who could hold his hand through pain, show up in the darkest hours, and choose family over pride. For older viewers, this story speaks deeply to the power of forgiveness, redemption, and second chances. Healing doesn't always come with time. Sometimes it comes when someone decides not to walk away. And maybe the bravest thing we can ever do is stay